Are we witnessing a global intifada? The same global intifada, the same uprising, which we have heard preached across the globe for the last 14 months by terror sympathisers who want the West to fall. Overnight, at least 15 people were killed when they were mowed down at high speed by a man who drove his truck into crowds in New Orleans. He has been identified as Shamsuddin Jabbar. The FBI says he was inspired by Islamic State and was, quote, hell-bent on carnage.
It was very intentional behaviour. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. This perpetrator, who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
The attack happened on the busy and well-known Bourbon Street where New Year's revellers were having the time of their lives. The FBI says Shamsuddin Jabbar was a recent convert to Islam and believe he was not acting alone. In fact, they found weapons and explosives in his vehicle. And authorities are also investigating whether a massive explosion in a Tesla Cybertruck outside a Las Vegas hotel owned by Donald Trump is connected to that terrorist attack. Now, let's be clear. The West is not next. Terror is happening in the West now. In fact, it has been happening for some time. And who is to blame? Western countries have done this to themselves by refusing to call out extremism and refusing to shut down the hate and threats spewed on our streets by terror sympathisers. The warning signs have been there for a long time, but they have been ignored. This was entirely predictable. Since October 7, pro-Palestine protesters have taken over the streets. They excused and tried to justify the murder and slaughter of innocent Jews. In places like Europe and the US, it has been even more menacing and intimidating. Flags of terror groups have been waved so brazenly in the streets. Here at home in Australia, we saw the ugly scenes on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. And there are hate preachers who walk among us who openly and publicly celebrated the massacre. On college campuses in the US, American flags were burned. They wanted an uprising. They called for resistance and, again, a global intifada.
Intifada revolution! Long live Intifada! Long live Intifada! Mobilize Intifada! Mobilize Intifada!
Over at Harvard University, they wanted intifada in their own backyard.
Intifada coming to America! Intifada, Intifada coming to America! Intifada, Intifada coming to America!
Intifada isn't just some fun, throwaway phrase between classmates at universities. It's a rallying call for terror. Intifada, Arabic for uprising, is associated with the Second Intifada, a period of terror attacks in Israel in the early 2000s marked by suicide bombings. And the rallying call, the rallying cry, has been ignored by leaders across the world. When these radicals tell you what they want, believe them, because here we are with an ISIS-inspired terror attack in New Orleans. The terrorist Shamsuddin Jabbar is a US citizen and military veteran from Texas. The FBI says an ISIS flag was located in the vehicle and that the FBI is working to determine the subject's potential associations and affiliations with terrorist organisations. Jabbar deliberately went around barricades to get into Bourbon Street and plough into the crowd, occasionally even veering onto sidewalks at high speed. He was intent on running over as many people as he could. And hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media that indicated he was inspired by ISIS and expressed desire to kill. He was a terrorist sympathiser. Cops were shot out and explosives detonated at the same time. This man left behind a trail of carnage. Wake up, America. and wake up the world. This is what a global intifada looks like. And if you want more proof, hours later, after the New Orleans terror attack, pro-Palestine supporters took over downtown Manhattan. Can you guess what they called for? A global intifada. They chanted, "Resistance is glorious. We will be victorious. We will honour all our martyrs. Gaza, you make us proud. And there is only one solution: intifada revolution." So not for peace, certainly not anti-war, but for death and violence. And this is what Israel is up against. It's the only country fighting against it, and at the same time being persecuted by Western leaders for fighting a battle against terror, not only for itself, but for the world. Islamic terrorists have been focused on Israel since October 7, but they haven't forgotten the West. But the West has forgotten about them because of a lack of moral clarity. And let's cut to the chase. When will the West actually call out the problem? It has become a huge issue around the world, and leaders have no courage or no moral clarity to do anything about it. How many more thoughts and prayers will it take? No more tiptoeing around this issue for fear of being called racist or Islamophobic. It's not. And we can't sit around and pretend there are people who walk among us who hate this country, hate the country they live in, or the country in which they were welcomed into with open arms to spew their ideology. Now, I'm not saying everyone is a bad apple, but how many more innocent lives are we willing to sacrifice? The security bollards that line Bourbon Street, where the attack happened overnight, were being replaced at the same time. But what bothers me is, why do we have bollards everywhere on roads around the world? What are authorities protecting us from? From cars mowing down people in the name of extremism? Again, why won't they name the threat? And get this, despite an ISIS flag being found in the truck, the FBI's first response was to assure America that it was not an act of terror.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found. And we are working on confirming if it's a viable device or not.
A bloke just goes around with an ISIS flag and a couple of improvised explosive devices, but no, it can't possibly be terror. The ISIS flag means absolutely nothing. When will they name the threat that exists? And I will say this, we should acknowledge that the peaceful majority of Muslims do live among us, and that is an important distinction. But we can't be blind to the radical pockets of faith, or the global intifada will run us. And right now, we are all sitting ducks.